Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the July 10th, 2013 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order. We have 6 public hearings on our agenda tonight, the first of which is a zoning application for a rezoning of approximately 8.5 acres along South Malloy Lane from RMO to heavy industrial. Murfreesboro Electric Department is the applicant. Ms. Ely, good evening.
Thank you, sir. Our first public hearing this evening is to conduct a public hearing to consider changing the zoning of 2 parcels of property which total approximately 8.5 acres from their current RMO district, which is mobile home district, to HI district. And if you look at the map that we have on the screen, it identifies the property, the 2 parcels for which were being considered a zoning change. You can see that the properties to the north, south, west, and east are zoned HI, heavy industrial district. There is a smaller portion of property located along West Malloy Lane, which is also zoned RMO, which is mobile home district. This request is coming to you from the Murfreesboro Electric Department, who has a contract to purchase these 2 properties. Their request is to change the zoning to HI so that it would be similar to that, that of the zoning of the contiguous properties around it, so that they will be able to use the property for their purposes as a utility provider. The Planning Commission should conduct a public hearing prior to making a recommendation to City Council regarding this request. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing.
Any questions from Ms. Ely? Okay, before I open the public hearing, I'll briefly go over our rules that we conduct them by. I will open the public hearing, and I'll ask anybody to come forward to the microphone that would like to speak either for or against this proposal. When you come up to the microphone, please state your name clearly and give your address. Keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and make all your comments to the Planning Commission. If you do have questions, we'll make notes of your questions, and the staff will attempt to answer them at the conclusion of the public hearing. All that being said, I'll open the public hearing at this time and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak.
Chairman Lamb, members of the Commission, my name is P.D. Mined, 321 Calumet Trace. I'm the controller for Murfreesboro Electric Department. We're looking at this property to build a new warehouse and operations center. We've exhausted our current storage yards and warehouse facility downtown at our current location. We've agreed to purchase this 8.5 acres on Malloy Lane near Johnson Controls. We intend to construct a 25 to 35,000 square foot warehouse, a pole and transformer yard. We'd also have truck and equipment storage there, and also an engineering and operations building. We'd relocate between 40 and 50 employees to this facility. Of course, we'd provide on-site parking for customers meeting with our engineering staff. We would provide fencing and security around the site with video cameras and lighting. We've signed a firm purchase agreement with Charles Hass, the current owner. We anticipate closing the property by October 2013. We've already completed Phase 1 environmental assessment that found no significant environmental issues on the property. Boundary survey is in process and field work has been completed. We anticipate, if we get this zoning change, moving into the site in 2 to 2.5 years.
Okay.
I would entertain any questions.
Any questions from Mr. Minor? Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Would anybody else like to speak? Nobody? In that case, I'll close the public hearing. Any questions or comments from the staff or members of the Planning Commission?
Chairman Lamb, if there are none, I make a motion we approve, subject to any staff comments.
Second motion.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Second public hearing is a zoning application for the rezoning of approximately 1.13 acres along East Main Street from RM12 to Commercial Highway, and approximately 0.63 acres along Arnett Street from PCD to Commercial Highway. Mr. Matt Taylor, on behalf of Special Kids Incorporated, and Mr. Milton Cranford are the applicants. Ms. Ely.
Thank you, sir. Our next public hearing is to consider a zoning change for 2 parcels of property, one of which is located along East Main Street, and it's currently zoned RM12, which is multifamily residential district, and would allow various types of residential uses. That property is identified as purple on the map that you have on the screen. The second part of this request is to change the zone for property located along Arnett Street, Zone PCD, Planned Commercial District, which is identified as Request Area 2, from its PCD or Planned Commercial District Zone to CH as well. This application was being made by Special Kids, who last month made an application to change the zoning of the property that's shaded orange on the map. That parcel is located on the corner of East Main Street and Arnett Street. That was approved by both the Planning Commission and City Council and is currently awaiting its third and final reading to become effective. The Special Kids then were presented with an opportunity to purchase the property adjacent to the parcel for which they've gotten a rezoning, and that is the purple parcel. So the orange and purple parcel are under contract by Special Kids, and the request is to change the zoning to CH so that Special Kids can provide its services on a larger, expanded services and provide it to more children. The owner of the parcel shaded blue, which is on CD, Planned Commercial District, became aware of Special Kids' application and requested to join in the application to change his zoning of his property from Planned Commercial District to or bulk zone CH, Commercial Highway District. These properties are bounded by various types of zoning districts. The properties to the west are zoned CH, Highway Commercial District. The properties to the north are zoned Multifamily Residential District and PRD, Plain Residential District. The parcel to the east is zoned, the two parcels to the east are also zoned Multifamily District, and the parcels to the south are zoned Multifamily District. Mr. Matt Taylor has represented Special Kids, but he's not here this evening. Mr. Jamie Reed is here, and he is representing Mr. Matt Taylor, who's representing Special Kids. Also, I believe Mr. Chris Truelove is here this evening, and he's representing Special Kids. It's my impression that Mr. Reed might want to say some things before the public hearing, or no, I've been misinformed. But if you have any questions from staff, we'll be glad to answer them at any point. But you should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation to City Council.
Okay, nobody from the applicant would like to make any comments prior to the public hearing?
Chairman Lamb, I think Mr. Cranford is present if there were any questions of him.
Mr. Cranford, do you have any comments before we open the public hearing? Thank you, sir. Okay, if there's no comments before the public hearing, I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. One at a time. Nobody at all? In that case, I'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Young.
we've studied these parcels in our study sessions earlier, and I think everything's in good order, and I'll move for approval.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. The next public hearing is a zoning application for a PUD amendment of approximately 18.9 acres along Hillwood Drive. Mr. John Harney is the applicant. Ms. Ely.
Thank you, sir. Our third public hearing this evening is to consider amending the planned unit district zone for a portion of property that is a part of the Hillwood development. This property is part of an overall planned unit district zoning district. A portion of the property has already been developed with multifamily dwelling units, and you can see that it's located north of Highway 96 or Old Fort Parkway, adjacent to the Franklin Road Baptist Church. The portion of property on the northern half of the property is, of course, zone PUD and is anticipated to be an extension of single-family detached homes. The super speed wash is an out parcel located in this planned development, and it's currently developed, and I believe it's open for business. This portion of the PUD, which is a total of 18.9 acres, we've received a request to amend the uses permitted in this specific area. Currently, the PUD Hillwood program book calls for this property to be developed with single-family attached housing, so a condominium form of development. The desire of the applicant is to amend the PUD to allow the property to be developed with 71 single-family detached dwellings. So the plan currently approved allows 139 townhome condominium units on this 18.9 acres. But if you do decide to approve this change, the change will be to decrease the maximum number of units from 139 down to 71 units, and to change the product type from an attached townhome product to a detached single-family dwelling product. You've been included in your program books, and I believe couriered a copy of the amended program book. And if you do decide to recommend approval of this change, this amendment will become effective for just this 18.9 acres of property. Mr. John Harney is representing the applicants. He's here this evening. Mr. Jamie Reed is also here this evening. And again, I've gotten an email saying that you'll have something to say, but Mr. Reed, do you have anything before the public hearing? Okay. I'll invite you to go ahead and come up to the lectern at this time.
It takes you about a minute to speak, Jamie.
Mr. Taylor sent me an email saying that Mr. Reed would have something prepared, not a PowerPoint, but he would like to say a few words. However, I know Mr. Harney enjoys taking an opportunity to speak to you. After his presentation, you should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation to the City Council.
Don't let Mr. Young shame you into speaking.
Hello, I'm Jamie Reed with SEC. I'm representing Matt Taylor here tonight. I'm a little new to this site, but anyhow, this is Hillwood PUD that we're rezoning, like she mentioned earlier, down to 71 lots. The minimum lot sizes or house sizes are 6,500 square feet. The lots are roughly 51 by 135 deep. The mixture of the houses will all be some masonry products and some vinyl, with 2-car garages, concrete drives for 4 cars per lot. As you can see on sheet 2 there of the booklet, shows the outline of the 71 lots. There's also sidewalks on both sides, and 1.4 acres of open space allowed for this development. All the homes will be minimum 2-bedroom with a density of 3.8 lots per acre. The minimum house sizes will be 1,450 square feet to 2,000. It's kind of a brief overview of in a nutshell.
Okay. Any questions?
Mr. Reed, is the exterior that you're proposing now pretty much the same exterior that the condos had that were originally approved?
If I have to defer back to John Harney on that.
You're a design engineer?
Yes, sir. I'm not the architect on the deal.
Mr. Halburton, to answer your question, the townhomes were proposed to be, I think, like 70% brick. We're going after more of a craftsman look on the single-family detached, so it's a combination of masonry products and some hardy plank and vinyl soffits, vinyl dormers, that sort of thing. Okay. So it's sort of to break up the facade a little more, but have sort of a craftsman look to it, so it'll be a nice-looking product. Of course, we're going down to a lot less density than what we had originally approved on the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Harney. Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Okay.
Any comments from members of the Planning Commission or the staff?
So they're taking it from 139 units down to 79. Is that the right numbers?
71.
71.
But who's counting? I think that's correct, Mr. Young. If there's no other questions, we're ready for a motion.
Yep.
No, excuse me, we got to raise this is a little matter of the public hearing. I'll open the public hearing this time, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Now we're ready for a motion.
Chairman Lamb, I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. The next public hearing is the annexation petition for approximately 28.61 acres along Veterans Parkway, Wright Family Partnership, and Ms. Mary F. Reed are the applicants. Ms. Stradelot.
Yes, sir. The subject property is located along the east side of Veterans Parkway. This property is north of Highway 96. It consists of 3 tracts. 2 of them are owned by the Wright Family Partnership, Ms. Wright and her family, and 1 parcel is owned by Ms. Mary F. Reed. The annexation is to annex all of the property except for a 30-foot strip along the north side of the Reed property. In looking at the illustration, and I would ask that Ms. Eda show you, you can see that the property is sandwiched between land that's in the city that's colored yellow on the map. The property to the east is otherwise surrounded by the city. If the 30-foot strip were to be included in the annexation and were to be annexed, it would cause that area to be completely surrounded. Under the state of the law in Tennessee right now, where the General Assembly has placed a moratorium on certain annexations, the city could not annex that land unless, well, we just cannot annex it unless those property owners were to also petition the city to annex it, or at least the majority of them were. Because that's a large subdivision, that's unlikely to be able to be accomplished at this point. So in order to avoid having to annex that area, the applicants have asked to leave a 30-foot strip out. There are two reasons, and one of those reasons is, of course, to not annex the area to the east, but the other is to allow that to be a buffer strip, and that will become something that will be discussed more during the zoning public hearing that will be had next on the property. The staff, the agenda materials include a annexation feasibility study. The annexation feasibility study indicates that the city can annex this property. We are, as a staff, aren't particularly pleased with the prospect of having gaps in our city limits. That's sort of a consequence of the state law right now. But we feel that we should be annexing the right-of-way as it fronts upon the parcels along with this annexation. The annexation, we have the ability to extend services, sewers on the property, waters on the property, police services will be easy to extend, so will fire protection, all other services the city provides. We already provide these same services to the property to the north and to the south, so it ought to be pretty easy. Veterans Parkway is a new highway. The city participated in its construction, so it should be something that we're already under contract to maintain the whole road anyway. The Planning Commission needs to conduct a public hearing on this annexation and then make a recommendation on it. For those who are interested in participating, this is the first of 3 public hearings. After the annexation public hearing, we'll discuss the matter of zoning, and you'll notice that those are items E and F on the agenda. So this first public hearing is to consider annexation. This is a little bit unusual, so there may be some questions. We'll be glad to answer.
Okay. Any questions of the staff before we move on further? Okay. Mr. Reed or anybody representing the applicant, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, Planning Commissioners. My name is Kevin Gunther with Huddleston Steel. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening to represent this annexation request. We do believe this is within context of the urban growth boundary of the city. As Mr. Adelot had mentioned, the services are here, the surrounding infrastructure here, and we do respectfully request for a recommendation of approval of annexation. Myself and Mr. John Harney and Mr. Reed will also be here to answer questions regarding the forthcoming rezoning request.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gunther. There's nobody else to speak for the applicant. I'll open the public hearing this time. Ask anybody to come forward.
My name's Lawrence Harvin. I live at 277 Meadow Lane, right across the creek. The last time I was here, we were talking about the area where the Closter Drive is, and there was a buffer zone, a wildlife area along the side of the creek. But I've noticed in this new drawing here with the map, there's no indication that that will continue. And does anyone know, will it or will it not?
We'll make note of that, and we'll ask the staff to address that, sir.
Right, because we have a lot of wildlife in that area. We have deer and turkey and other animals that live in that area, and it's a wonderful thing to have there. And it was continued in the Closter Drive area, and I hope they'll just bring it right on down the creek.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon. Anybody else? Anybody at all? Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing.
I have a question.
Ms. Gianna?
Is there floodplain along the back end of this?
Yes, sir, there is. And in the annexation feasibility study, I think there's an illustration that was depicted. And let's see, Ms. Ely, if you could go to that real quickly, that'd be, and I'm looking for it on my copy. But the floodway is actually located in the back there, and the floodplain. And the flood area consists of two parts, the floodway and the floodplain. The floodway is an area that you just pretty much have to stay out of. We don't allow development to take place in it. So we expect that it will, in many respects, continue. You can see it on the map in the area that's colored basically orange, that's bounded by the two red lines immediately adjacent to the channel. That's the floodway. The area that's the remainder of the red area, that's the 100-year flood. Development can take place in that area, but it has to meet the requirements of the flood insurance program. It requires that the floor elevations be raised to 1 foot above it. But the river channel, the creek channel, has to remain undeveloped. Also, there is what we call a WQPA, and that's a water quality protection area. It's required to be an area that has very limited disturbance adjacent to the river channel or to the stream channel. That's a city requirement under our stormwater program. The manner in which the cloister continued that is as a common area. They basically just completely stayed out of it because it was all pretty much floodway anyway. So they opted to just completely stay out of it. When we see development back there, we will expect that they will probably do something a little bit different than what the cloister did, because I don't see that being developed as a single-family subdivision. But there will be a expectation that they do stay out of that the creek channel. We'll be reviewing site plans in the future, and that's the kind of thing we do monitor very closely. And we will be sending inspectors out whenever any kind of development takes place on the property.
Mr. Harvin, you have a natural buffer with the floodway there, which cannot be touched at all. And so I'm sure there'll be adequate provisions to not completely root out the wildlife, even though there will be some impact, obviously, with development on the property. Any other questions or comments from the Planning Commission? If not, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion to approve the annexation, subject to all staff comments.
Motion is made. Is there a second?
Mr. Wade, I want to be careful. This won't be subject to any staff comments. It would be subject to the annexation feasibility study.
Yeah.
And I want that. I want to help make that clear for the record that that is the case.
That's the case.
You've got us trained so well, Mr. Adelot, about staff comments that sometimes it just spills over, you know. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The next public hearing is a zoning application for the rezoning of approximately 10.6 acres to commercial highway along Veterans Parkway, simultaneous with annexation. Wright Family Partnership and Ms. Mary F. Wright applicants. Mr. Adelot.
Yes, sir. This is a portion of the very same property that we just discussed. As I mentioned, there are 3 parcels involved. This would consist of the southern parcel, and the request or application is to zone this property to commercial highway simultaneous with its annexation. When land is annexed into the city, we need to establish a zoning classification, or else there will be a default application of the zone ordinance. In this case, the applicants have made an application for the property to come in zoned commercial highway. The property immediately to the south is already zoned commercial highway. It consists of several parcels. Although they look like several parcels right now, they're really owned by primarily by one property owner. The owner in the very corner is owned separately to the south, but the remainder of those parcels are owned by one property owner. They have cleared the land. The structures that were formerly on them have been removed. They are looking to possibly increase the size of that landmass to include some of the property that's in the area that's requested to be zoned commercial highway to set it up for a possible development. The application is to zone it to commercial highway. The Planning Commission needs to conduct a public hearing and then prepare a recommendation for the City Council. I see we have in the audience Mr. Harney. I think you're who's the representative for this application? Mr. Gunther is. So Mr. Gunther and Mr. Harney will be answering questions.
Mr. Gunther, do you have anything you'd like to add before we open the public hearing?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Lamb, Planning Commissioners, Kevin Gunther, Huddleston Steel, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. As Mr. Adelot had mentioned, specific to this commercial rezoning, One of the main reasons we are requesting this as we bring the annexation is that it will allow for the correct size parcel that we think would accommodate the needs for the type of anchor, the type of commercial development that would well suit the corner of Veterans Parkway and Highway 96. So this allows us to really catch a vision for the future, what we think is going to happen here, and at the same time we're annexing allows that commercial piece to fit with what's already existing to the south. Also, as has been mentioned, the overall creek will act as a buffer between this commercial property and anything to the east. So the water quality zone, existing trees, existing green space will remain adjacent to the property on the east side. And Mr. Harney and myself are here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Any questions at this time? Maybe after the public hearing. Okay, I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward to speak either for or against this proposal.
Hi, my name is Steve Blades. I live at 418 Ossabaw Drive inside the cloister. This gentleman just mentioned taking that parcel of land, adding that in so it's a decent size for an anchor that would go into that corner at 96 and Veterans Parkway. So my question would be, what kind of store would that anchor be? We've got a lot of homes that are over there in the cloister right now that a lot of people have invested time and money in. We don't want to see something come in there that might drop our property value. So it's an honest question.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Would anybody else care to speak?
Hello, Virgil Barnes, 5427 Cloister. Also similar concerns about the growth of the area. Right now, it is zone commercial, but as it was stated earlier, there is a house there on the corner, nice and quaint, and now this looks to extend that closer into the cloister. I believe the gentleman mentioned that it would be an anchor and they would maintain some green space and trees, but yet I think the next hearing, if I'm not mistaken, with my directions might be contradictory because it's going to be to rezone that to multiple houses. So just general concerns about the growth of the city. I think we're moving pretty fast in growth, both in terms of this commercial as well as some of the residential ones that we'll see moving forward. So I do have concerns about the zoning and annexation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Okay. If not, I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Adelot, can you address their questions or give some light to that, please?
As to what kind of commercial growth, the first place I look for guidance when I talk about zone and land development patterns is I look to the Blackman land use study for this area. This area was depicted for an area for this general area, not specific parcel-wise, but general area, for a neighborhood type of commercial opportunity. And that equates to something like a grocery store. And that's what I expect will be probably formulating in that area. And it'll probably have the kind of parcels that go with a grocery store. So, in fact, something very similar to what's in front of Garrison Cove. The Rutherford Village is the kind of use that I would expect. First, using the Blackman land use study and then looking at the type of location and also the needs of that corridor.
From hearing the comments from the two residents that spoke, I think they were concerned about the quality of the development, but what we've seen happen in Blackman and other areas lately with master planning and large anchor stores, the design reviews have been very, very nice in comparison to years in past.
Well, I think that the city's investment in expectation has begun to pay off. And even when, say, for instance, Kroger's on South Church Street, they're coming back in and redeveloping their store, and they're doing a dramatic upgrade in building appearance. The Gateway has made the commercial competition, well, it's raised the bar. It is exactly what it's done. The Gateway Design Overlay District Standards has become something that influences even development out here in places like this, because that now whoever is coming to our community knows what our expectations are, and we've got a good example to show them, and they have to be competitive with what is at the top of the food chain, and the Gateway very definitely is. In terms of the land prices, it's probably way up there. So it's going to be my expectation that there will be an investment in quality when we see development here. That's something that when we meet with the developers, when we meet with their real estate teams, when we meet with the design teams, we talk about building appearance, we talk about building materials, we talk about building orientation. We talk a lot about screening, we talk about noise, we talk about the landscaping, we talk about side lighting. We have certain standards for all of these. We don't have the masonry requirement in this area that we do in the Gateway, but the message has been sent, and it seems to have been well received by the development industry in our community. And if you ride around, you see it. You see it in all the new developments. You can see that it's a whole lot better than the old ones we used to see. Does that help answer your question, Mr. Blaze? And you're welcome to stop by our City Hall planning office sometime. We'll talk about it further.
I think you brought up a good point, Mr. Aylott. I think when the city implemented the design standards for the review for the Gateway area, we didn't realize we were trying to protect the Gateway development area there. We didn't realize that it would affect the whole community in a positive way as much as it has, but it's really been a great influence on all development since we originally put those guidelines in, and everything now is compared to the Gateway. And like you said, it sets a very high bar, and the resulting has been an upgrading in all the development, I think, across Murfreesboro. Any other comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
Mr. Aylott, in the Blackman land use study, it's what, 10 years old now?
No, sir, it's older than that.
Is it older?
The Blackman Land Use Study was adopted in 2000.
All right. Well, would this be considered a local commercial node?
This is that type of commercial. This is consistent with the Blackman Land Use Study. The Blackman Land Use Study had a way of maybe undershooting some of the balloons in terms of their size, but to see that type of use and to see enough land to do it right. One of the things that I'm conscious about is that when we put standards for stormwater on a developer, when we put requirements for landscaping and require that parking lots be landscaped, we basically require that they use more land. Those standards didn't exist in 2000 when we adopted the Blackman study. So sometimes for these type of commercial developments, these type of commercial centers, they need more land than they used to need. So the balloon may be a little bit bigger here when we look at the whole tract, but it will be the same type of use. And I think I would opt for a better design and a better community and a larger commercial balloon here if I have my choice.
Thank you. Okay. If there's no further comments, we're ready for a motion.
Chairman Lamb, I make a motion that we approve, subject to staff comments.
There ain't no staff comments. It's got to be either up or down.
You've created 7 months. Yeah. You've drilled that staff comment stuff into us for so many years now.
That's plans and plans.
The motion is made and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed. It carries. Thank you, Mr. Halliburton. Very, very well done. The final public hearing of the evening is a zoning application for a rezoning of approximately 16.4 acres to RM16 along Veterans Parkway, simultaneous with annexation, Wright Family Partnership, and Mrs. Mary F. Reed are the applicants. Mr. Adelon.
Yes, sir. This property consists of the second two parcels that were considered for annexation earlier in the agenda. The property includes the land owned by the Wright Family Partnership and Ms. Mary F. Reed. The area that was annexed did not include a 30-foot strip, and that's still going to remain in the unincorporated area that's along the north side, and that's adjacent to the Cloister development. The application is to zone this property to RM16 simultaneous with its annexation. RM16 means residential, multifamily, allowing 16 dwelling units per acre. The acreage here is about 16.4 acres, and if we were to see it develop, we're looking at somewhere around 260 multifamily units could be developed under that classification on this property. The size would allow for a proper multifamily campus that would have the type of amenities that will allow for management and for the kind of quality we want to see. Something that I do want to advise the Planning Commission on is that the plan staff is currently working on a study for multifamily and the impacts on schools. Council asked about that recently, and we're working on it. Mr. Matthew Blomley has made great headway on this study. Unfortunately, he's not been able to complete it because, as most of us recognize, during the summer, the school systems go at a little bit different tempo with a little bit different activities. And the person with the Rutherford County Schools has not been available to get all the information that Mr. Blomley needs to finish his study. However, the Murfreesboro City Schools has been very forthcoming and very helpful. And what we're seeing in these type of multifamily campuses of this size and scale that are along our major arteries, that are remote from MTSU, particularly the newer ones, they are usually not subsidized housing, they're market rate, and they usually have very low numbers of students, elementary school age students in them. One of the things that has impressed me as I've begun to look at the preliminary report is that many of these complexes, they may have 260 to 300 units, may have only one, and I'm going to repeat that, only one elementary school age child that lives in the whole complex. Many of them have zero. One complex, I noticed in the numbers, had about 23, and that was over around MTSU. And that's one that we used to know of as the Oak Park Apartments. It's got a different name now. But it's a different market. It's a different area. And yes, it had 23, and it seems like it had about 160 to 200 units in it, which is probably one of the highest number of complexes. So I felt that I had better give you a little bit of a staff report, although the report's not coming. I do intend for the Planning Commission to have a copy of that report, hopefully before it goes to the City Council, so that you all have a chance to see if there's anything we've left out of it. The property, when the first part came to me for the commercial to discuss, I discussed the remainder of the property of the family here and the Reed property, and the recognition that it does not have the characteristics that are necessary for single-family development. It doesn't. If there was a street that stubbed out of the Cloister, we could see a subdivision into that area. If it had a street that stubbed across into the subdivision across the overall creek, it could see a single-family development pattern. But the way it sits, adjacent to commercial, backing up to the creek, it sort of does not lend itself well to a single-family paradigm. If it were to be a single family, it would probably be looking at a very high density type of approach. It is in fact a transition area. The RM16 classification allows for the ability to create a campus that can be both respectful of the residential to the north and compatible with the commercial to the south. It also has the ability to be well buffered from the property to the east by the floodplain and the water quality protection area of Overall Creek. It does have direct frontage on the highway, the Veterans Parkway. It has the land mass necessary. It has the utility capabilities. So it lends itself well to a multifamily paradigm. The application has been made, and the Planning Commission will need to respond to it. One more thing I want to talk about on this, I was about to let it slip, is that 30-foot strip. Not only, as I mentioned earlier, not only is it to keep from having to annex the property to the east that's developed with a subdivision in unincorporated Rutherford County, but it also will become a buffer. Our requirements for a buffer, RM16 adjacent to single family, would be a type C buffer, 15 foot. Well, the applicants realize that they're looking at 30 foot. and they'll be staying out of that, and they'll be landscaping and using that for the buffer when and if we see a development take place on this property. So they're going to try to, I guess as a best practice, look at something that's extra wide. The best buffer is not always trees. The best buffer is distance. But it's also when it's combined with a good quality landscaping and proper plantings, it can be a very effective buffer. We need to conduct a public hearing. I'll be taking notes, and then we'll answer questions, and then you'll need to prepare a recommendation for the City Council.
Mr. Gunther?
Thank you once again, Chairman Lamb, Planning Commissioners, Kevin Gunther, Huddleston Steel, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We appreciate staff's review of this project, and we concur that I will say that there's a reason that we kind of have become accustomed to saying in condition of staff review and approval. And that is, as a land planner, as a landscape architect that works quite a bit in the city, I do appreciate the fact that the ordinances in place now have some teeth to them that relate to buffers, relate to design, relate to the right approach on how to develop the specifics of a site. So one of the things I'd like to point out this evening is not only do we have, for this multifamily rezoning, good buffers in place with us just in terms of distance, overall creek, commercial to the south, an extra 30 feet to the north, but we realize that as this parcel becomes subject to site plan review, as a landscape architect, we're going to need to make sure that that high bar is considered. We do feel that the site is that good transition between the commercial and the residential to the north. And I will point out that the plan development that is to the north of this parcel does have some of the smaller lots and the zero lot lines, and therefore, you know, we are kind of literally in that transition zone between the single family and some of the smaller zero lot line products. We will be here to answer any questions. We appreciate your review of this project and would respectfully request a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunther. If there's no other comments or questions, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
And thank you for your time. Virgil Barnes, 5427 Cloister Drive. Again, I have concerns about some of the comments I'm hearing about our investments paying off in the city and the expectations. Gentleman mentioned that it just only makes sense to have this because commercial is adjacent to it, almost presuming that the commercial would already be approved prior to this meeting. Again, the only commercial around that area prior to this meeting was a lovely lady on the corner whose house sits there nice and quietly. Again, I think the city's growing too fast. We don't have enough good jobs. I'm not talking about Amazon warehouse jobs, corporate jobs. I believe the second tallest building in the city is a prison. So again, more people coming, not enough good jobs, more people up and down I-24, quality of life, 2-hour commute, 8-hour day. We're moving too fast. We are welcoming subdivision, but again, I think, and we also respect property rights. These property owners have the right to sell the property to someone else who wants to maintain that openness and that look, so I think that should remain the option for that area. If it does move forward, which sounds like it's inevitable because of the domino effect of the annexation and the commercial, we do ask that the 30-foot buffer is maintained, but also even more possibly trees or a hill to extend that buffer that we have between the cloister and what looks like an inevitable rezoning of that area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
Steve Blades, 418 Ossabaw Drive. Y'all have to forgive me. This is my first time ever coming to one of these meetings, but I lived in greater Nashville for about 6 years, and I moved off to Florida for a couple of years, and then a week ago I moved back. So I've been in my house a week. It's been a lot of work.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it already. But I got on the site to look up waste management, and that's how I found out about this meeting, and that's how I found out about this annexation and what was being proposed to be built in there. And it concerned me a little bit, because I, spent a great deal of money buying this house, from hundreds of miles away, decided that this is where I wanted to live. And I'm not the only one. There's a lot of guys in our community. It's a fairly large community. And now there's the possibility that we could bring in these multifamily homes. People need places to live, and I completely understand that. Where those places are can be detrimental to home value overall. When we move in a multifamily facility that's something that's not owned condominiums, then that is automatically going to devalue anything that's on that road right there. It's going to happen. And, sir, I know you were talking about the school impact, and you were saying maybe one. I will tell you that when I left Tennessee, I was living in Aventura, Providence, up there in Mount Juliet, brand new community, $1,100 a month in rent, and we had quite a few school-age children in there because it was a nice area. It was right there with Providence, had all these beautiful homes and everything else, and everybody wanted to be in that area. And the school there definitely suffered for it, and now they're having to build a whole new school because they couldn't handle the growth of the area, and Providence and Aventura itself contributed to that because there was a whole busload of kids that came out of there just for the elementary school alone. So again, that's something to think about. But just wanted to give my thoughts real quick.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Jeff Rainwater. I live at 1030 Bringston Run here in Murfreesboro. And I have a concern about the another RM16 rezoning that has seemed to be the fun thing to do in the Blackman community right now. Since, basically so I got to looking at this because there was one right next to our house that was another one after one just completed. And on January 1, 2013, there were about 622 is what I estimated the number of apartments in the Blackman community. This would be the Blackman Land Use Study area. Over the next couple of years, if all of them get built out that I found the zonings for, and they're coming on pretty quick, you'll add about 2,412 units on top of that. That'll bring you to over 3,000 units in the Blackman area. This is a pretty small area. Not to mention that you're going to have about 1,000 of them surrounding the new school that the citizens are paying $20 million for. And then this is only, half a mile away maybe? You'll put another 260. You're getting very, very dense with non-owned properties. And when you think about the property value of the people that have invested in the Blackman community, when you see that going in, you drive by after apartment complex, apartment complex, apartment complex, you may not buy a house there. We've seen, you see this in certain areas. Everything's fine as long as the economy stays about where it is. You're going to see a lot of rental. The economy starts to heat up and get really going. More people buy houses. Vacancies start to happen. The market takes over. You could very well have issues out of this. We have seen some very nice apartments in this area. And even down the street, there's a PUD called Westlawn that didn't make it because of economic issues that when the basic collapse happened. It's a PUD that has apartments, at least has some townhouses and some larger homes, and, it kind of flows and works. But these one-off RM16 rezonings have me very, very concerned, especially the way we're clustering these in all these little areas around there, that it will bring down the property values as a whole for the entire community. The Blackman Land Use Study had, different places where they were going to be there, but those small circles they had have turned into these giant oceans, especially right around this new school. So there's a lot of, as you look at it and you think about that, look a little more holistic at what you're doing there. And when we look at the impact on the schools, I'll challenge you that Bell Murfreesboro, I drive by to go to my house every day. It's the only way in and out of the subdivision. Last school year, there were 31 elementary school students attending Blackman from that townhouse community, from that apartment complex. I think it's just sub 300 maybe units, something like that. 31. It falls right in line with that, I think it's the 0.9 or whatever statistics thrown out, kind of falls right in there with it. That 31 was actually given to us from the Rutherford County Schools. It came right from Mr. Morgan, who does their planning for that. And it came out in a rezoning issue that happened back at the beginning of this year. So there are a lot of kids in these apartments. I can also attest that there's a lot more than just one or two that get on a school bus there. Because if you get stuck behind it, you're waiting for a few minutes because there's a lot of kids getting on. So I could definitely see, from my estimates, all these new apartments and everything, if they turn out like Bell Murfreesboro, which there's no reason to think they wouldn't, these are a lot of young families move into these and things like that, especially young professionals and stuff. And this is a very commutable area of town. It's one of the few areas of town where you can actually hit the interstate or Highway 96 and be at a place that has a lot of white-collar jobs very quickly. So you get a lot of young professionals in that area. Well, young professionals get married and have kids. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious what happens there. But I estimate there will be, just in the new school you're building, you'll probably open within a year 275 or so from the new apartments. And we're not building enough houses to balance this out. Houses haven't quite taken off right there. So what we've seen a lot of very large apartment complex companies that have their nationwide type companies all of a sudden figure out, hey, Blackman's a great place to build. Because I'll challenge you, look at where they're coming from. These are not members of our community. Not that I have a problem with corporate America. I mean, I'm an accountant. I get it. I'm pretty much a capitalist. But rezoning is, and I believe, heavily in property values. However, rezoning kind of levels the playing field between different property owners. It's there to protect both. But don't forget about the people that are in the Blackman community that have bought houses. And let's also try to be nice to those people that eventually would probably need to be annexed. They're probably not going to like a big apartment complex peering over the creek at them. Because if it's like a big orange apartment complex, like, say, in Take a Creek, and it's peering over the top of your, or orange-ish color, kind of a weird, brightly colored type development there that kind of sticks out. Peering over the creek at your house, it's not really what you want. You'd rather have something a little classier than that. Not that they didn't spend a lot of money on it. I think they just chose the wrong colors. But anyway, I'll end at that. But to let you know that there are a lot of school issues there, and it's not just the city schools we have issues with. With the new elementary school, we'll relieve a lot of issues, but there's also a high school there that's way overcrowded, along with the junior high that's packed too. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Nobody? You need to come up to the microphone, sir, and please state your name and address.
Joseph Kotsis, 326 Elderberry here in Murfreesboro. My question is, I came in late because of this rainstorm. I just want to know what area that we're discussing for rezoning for this apartment complex. I mean, I'm here for
We're talking about a 16.4 acre tract on Veterans Parkway in the Blackman community.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Anybody else? If not, I'll close the public hearing.
I have one question for Mr. Lott.
Sir.
Very quickly, explain to me how apartments serve as a transitional between commercial highway and single-family residential.
Often we look at the transition of uses to look at a more intense use to a lesser intense use. Historically, we have considered that multifamily, with a multifamily campus, was more intense than a single-family subdivision, but less intense than a shopping center, for instance. It was, after all, it is a residential use. but it has more intensity. It has more traffic associated with it because it's more concentrated. It has more buildings because it's basically a complex. So it's part of what we consider transitional use. It has often been considered to be a buffer. One of the things we have done in the city is to look at placing these residential complexes around the commercial nodes, if you will, between the heavier commercial and the more or less intense single-family subdivisions. Sometimes we look at a higher density single-family subdivision as being another transition to a very low density. That's reflected in our zoning map. It's been reflected in our policies through the years. So that's to answer your question. While I'm speaking, I want to answer something about Mr. Rainwater. Mr. Rainwater, you actually made a very good statement. Where do you go? Oh, there you are. And I want to clarify. Bale Murfreesboro is right within a stone's throw of the Blackman Elementary, just up the street. And the numbers that I've gotten so far, we have not gotten the numbers from the county to be able to put into the study. And as I reflect on it, I believe we're going to see that there will be probably more county students in our elementary schools in that immediate area over off of Fortress Boulevard than we will see in the city schools because it's a county school. So I don't have numbers on that yet, and that's part of the holdup the county's been able to get to us. So his number of 31 students may be a very good number, and it was a holdover from last year, 2012 or 2013? It was 2012, 2013. Thank you. So our numbers will be the same times, but we're still waiting that data from the county schools.
Historically, though, we have seen, if you take say a RS-10, what is the cloister, RS-10?
No, it's a PRD. Yes, PRD.
But it would equate to a RS-10 to 8 or something?
Somewhere between 8 and 10. Some of the lots are a little bigger and some smaller.
If you take the number of houses that's in the number of per acre on a subdivision like the cloister zone like that, compared it to a multifamily, say RS-16 or 12, RM-16 or 12, development for the same type acreage, you generally come up with fewer students per acre than you do with a apartment complex than you do with a typical residential neighborhood, though. That's been our general perception for the last 20 years.
That is part of what we're trying to delve into in our study. Acreage. On 16 acres, you may have 260 units. You may have, and let's just say, somewhere between me and Mr. Rainwater is a number of, let's just say 15 on 16 acres. The cloister was 70 acres. And let's say that there is let's say that they have close to 200 lots on that 70 acres. 200 lots, and they have 1.3 dwelling units per, or 1.3 students per dwelling unit, average. And that's all levels of school. So we're going to be looking at somewhere in the order of about close to 100 students, if my numbers are right, over 70 acres. It's a matter of intensity.
Okay. Mr. Jones, do you have any
No,
questions?
but the figure 0.3 in a RS-15 and 0.9 student is correct in there somewhere, and that's the ranges we've seen before, but we don't have the final data on that.
I think I think, and I'm going to ask Mr. Gunther, you did a little bit of research. 0.8 students per? You did a research into the APA study. Was that correct? You mentioned this at a council meeting recently.
Yes, sir. And actually, I believe the 0.3 per unit for apartment was pretty consistent. What the APA was saying, American Planning Association was saying that with single-family residential, it varied anywhere from 0.9 to 1.2 per unit. So, I think if you looked at the 0.9, that would probably be the low end in a single family based on the APA study. Now, staff here may find something different, but that was the national average.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gunther. Okay. Any other comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission?
Mr. Lamb, I have one question. Mr. Adelot, on this 30-foot buffer, would they have the ability to use a portion of that 30-foot buffer to accomplish the 15-foot type C buffer, or would it actually end up being a 45-foot buffer?
It would be 30. The 15-foot could be contained within that.
Okay.
And even though that's not part of the city limits, they would be covering that in their site plan process and review.
Yes, they could.
Okay. If there's no other questions, we're ready for a motion.
Seeing none, Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval.
I'll second the motion.
Clark made the motion to approve. It's been seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. That completes the public hearings portion of our agenda tonight. Move on to staff reports and other business. One item under that, Mr. Adelot, unless you have others, election of chair and vice chair for 2013 and 14. That sounds like it ought to be a long time off, 2013 and 14.
Well, actually, it is upon us. And the fiscal year has begun with the first of the year. And under our procedures for our planning commission, it requires that our first regular meeting in July that you elect chair and vice chair for the upcoming year. And that is a responsibility that you must attend. You can defer it for the whole planning commission if you feel you must, but it's a responsibility you all have, and you need to fulfill that responsibility.
Okay, what are the wishes of this commission?
I would make the motion that since you do an outstanding job, Mr. Lamb, and your counterpart right here, that we keep the same officers.
Motion is made and seconded.
We vote?
No.
If
All in
ma'am,
favor say aye.
Aye.
I presume it passes. Mr. Adelot, parliamentary, presume we're in good grounds there.
It takes 4 voting members to,
I vote for Mr. Young.
okay? And you,
and I vote for Mr. Lamb.
you got what it takes. It works.
Do you have any other business?
Yes, sir, I
Mr.
do.
Thank
I
you.
want
We stand
to.
oh, excuse me.
I want to give the Plan Commission and basically some information. The City of Murfreesboro, Rutherford County, Davidson County, part of Williamson County, is being included in a study sponsored by the MPO, and the city's participating in it, for the Southeast Land Use and Transportation study. This is something that is going to be a very important study for our region. It's going to be looking at the relationship of land use and transportation. Since the MPO is involved, you know that would be the case. They're having 2 opportunities for some public participation. First will be July 16th at 10 o'clock, and that will deal with, I think, more of the shippers. The Planning Commission members may want to attend that. When I say shippers, we're talking about trucking concerns. The second is sustainability and lifestyles, and that will be at 3 o'clock on the same day. Both meetings will be held at the Chamber of Commerce office. You may want to, if you're interested, call me, and I'll send you a link to see if you can get signed up, so that you're not just crashing the meeting, but that there is actually a place at the table and a chair for you to sit in.
Could you maybe have Carolyn or somebody send that out on email to all the members of the Planning Commission, please?
Yes, sir, we'll do that.
Anything else, Mr. Adelot?
That's all I had tonight.
There's no other business. We stand adjourned. Do we have a guest? I'm sorry, Mr. Charleston.
Yeah, just wanted to mention to you, Mr. Lamb, the Lee Springs Branch Watershed Neighborhood Meeting. This will be our last opportunity before that meeting, at a Planning Commission meeting, to invite the public out to that. Mr. Matt Taylor with SEC made a presentation to the Planning Commission at its workshop at the end of June. We scheduled a neighborhood meeting for the Lee Springs Branch Watershed for Monday, July 29th, 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m., Black Fox Elementary School. Lee Springs Branch Watershed is generally located along Manchester Highway between Dilton Mankin and Joe B. Jackson Parkway. And so we would like to invite any interested residents or neighbors out to that neighborhood meeting. We'll have some information on the watershed and on our efforts to study that area, and we'd invite you to attend.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any special guests in the audience tonight that we need to recognize?
I don't know who they are.
Okay.
Well, we have Mr. Jordan. He was actually part of one of the applications.
I thought he was make an application to join us up here.
I think his family's involved in one.
Mr. Jordan, you're welcome. Members of the county commission are always welcome, so thank you very much for being here. We do need, I would be remiss if I didn't say something about the news that Miss Ely had. Mr. Alott, would you like to cover that?
No, I think Ms. Ely can handle that on her own.
Miss Ely is no longer Miss Ely, it's Mrs. Green, I think. As of when was the big day?
Saturday, July 6th.
Well, congratulations. We're very proud for you.
Thank you.
You will instruct us on whether we keep with the Ely or the Green name.
I will. I'll train him just like I did Mr. Adler.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further business, we stand adjourned.